In honor of every starter Pokemon returning in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet thanks to the newly released Indigo Disc DLC, we're ranking every starter's final evolution based on their competitive merit in the singles metagames over the years. We've split the ranks up into 7 different rankings, with F rank being the worst, most unviable starter Pokemon, and S rank being the absolute best and most overpowered Pokemon. But first, this isn't a sponsor, but if you haven't already picked up the Indigo Disc DLC and you want to, but also want to support the channel, you can purchase it through my affiliate link for no extra cost, and it helps us out too. Just click the link in the description below. We'll kick things off with F rank, which is the worst of the worst, and though this isn't intentional, contains only one Pokemon. Oh, I bet you're all ready with your pitchforks in the comment section on who we put as the worst starter. Well, drum roll please. That Pokemon is Meganium. Now, it breaks our hearts to single out Meganium like this, because it's a favorite of many fans, us very much included. But it is far and away the worst starter Pokemon. It didn't even start bad too. It has a small niche in Gen 2 OU, which is pretty cool. It's incredibly rare and difficult to fit, but both its Leech Seed and Swords Dance variants have an interesting, albeit incredibly specific place. It's also quite good in Gen 3 UU and Gen 4 UU, especially notable for its superior bulk over Vileplume and its pure grass typing, meaning it actually resists ground, unlike Plume or Cradily. Sadly, since then, it's been nothing but the bottom of the barrel for Meganium. It was untiered in all of Gens 5, 6, and 7. That means it's been untiered as many times as Blaziken has been Uber. Thus, it is only right that Meganium receives the lowest rank for this singular so-called achievement, much as it saddens us. We move on to our next rank, the E rank. This is for the Pokemon that have occasionally been decent in the lower tiers, but either have been meager or haven't been in enough generations to warrant ranking higher. Starting the ranking off is regular Typhlosion, who certainly got its good points. Stab Eruption is one of the most stunningly powerful moves in the game, and Scarf and Specs Typhlosion puts it to good use with its great speed and special attack in Gen 4 NU and Gen 5 RU. The problem is that Fire-type competition is plentiful, and while Typhlosion is quite strong, most other fires are not truly left wanting for power either. Since Typhlosion, while not bad, doesn't really have much to distinguish itself from the competition aside from Eruption's power, this is valuable enough in Gens 4 and 5, but even then it's not the easiest to slap on a team, and it's much less useful. Later on, it finds itself with little usage or practical value in Gen 6 RU and Gen 7 NU. Hisuian Typhlosion is similar, while very sparingly used on Sun teams in OU and UU. After its Gen 9 introduction, the novelty quickly wore off, and it didn't really come into its own until it reached RU. There it is quite strong, with heavy-duty boots allowing it to make the most of its surprisingly adept defensive typing, where it launches its status-laden assault with Will-O-Wisp and its signature move Infernal Parade. Of course, it sometimes unleashes brutal eruptions as well, but Hisuian Typhlosion is more apt at playing a utility-focused game. With its great stab combination and power, it's great at punching holes in opposing teams. It's not the flashiest Pokemon, but it is quite decent, somewhat like a Chandelure. It's overlooked by many, but is genuinely decent in its own right. Next is Decidueye. It's definitely got its good points in Gen 7 NU. It can be a fierce wall breaker with its nasty plot set, it can be a solid defensive presence with the utility of the hazard removing defog, or it can do a little bit of both with an offensive defog set. It's solid in these roles, but can't always execute them with impunity in battle, as its weaknesses are significant. Being totally stifled by the ever-present Incineroar and having a pursuit weakness makes it tough to get the most out of Decidueye's talents, which is unfortunate. Still, it's a solid Pokemon, despite its drawbacks. There's also the lack of pursuit in Gen 8, and it's quite solid in NU there, with Choice Band, Swords Dance, and Choice Spec sets all offering varying degrees of offensive threat. Its average speed often holds it back, but even this can be overcome with its strong Shadow Sneak. Again, definitely a decent Pokemon, just a flawed one. Hisuian Decidueye, which becomes half fighting instead of ghost, is similar. It's a decent RU Pokemon, as its typing is amazing defensively, lending itself wonderfully to its bevy of utility in knockoff and defog. Furthermore, its fighting stab, Triple Arrows, makes it a downright absurd move at times, as it is a 90 base power move with a high crit rate, 50% chance to drop the opponent's defense, and 30% chance for a flinch. And if that wasn't enough, its scrappy ability means it bypasses ghost immunity to fighting. It actually saw some gimmicky usage in OU, as it was able to check Great Tusk while not fearing Goldengo's defog blocking thanks to scrappy triple arrows crushing it. While in UU it performed similarly well against Iron Treads, but it was gimmicky overall as its stats just couldn't match the other Pokemon in the tier. While at the time of this video it's still finding its feet with regards to what precisely it will be doing in RU, it's also shown itself adept at taking on the likes of Wo-Chien, Crocodile, and Tyranitar. Rounding out E rank is Inteleon. As far as dishing out water type offense goes, Inteleon's got a fantastic toolkit, an incredible base 120 speed alongside a stunning base 125 special attack lends itself perfectly to Specs Hydro Pump spam. Indeed, Inteleon was so nasty all the way down in Gen 8 PU that it got itself banned and maintained a great niche in NU as well. What was its flaw? Well, it's frail. It's got notably lower HP defense and special defense than that of the Pokemon it might most be compared to, Greninja. And Greninja is already a far cry from bulky. Additionally, Inteleon's move pool isn't too deep. Not that it has to be, as Hydro Pump, Ice Beam, and U-Turn are already great on a Pokemon with its stats, but it does mean that its role can be contested by those Pokemon with greater depth to their move pool, be it coverage or utility. Still, Inteleon is quite a solid Pokemon. It's just fragile even by wall breaker standards, and thus has to be played with care so it avoids taking any hits. With the D rank, we'll be going over the starters who have been decent in the lower tiers. First up is Chestnut, who carved out a solid role for itself in Gen 6 and 7 UU, with its great physical defense and lengthy list of ways with which it could dole out passive damage. Spikes, Leech Seed, and Spiky Shield most notably, while its proclivity for taking physical hits made it a natural candidate for Rocky Helmet as well. Its unique defensive profile was enhanced further by its bulletproof ability. It was useful in how it was consistent as a defensive Pokemon and chip damage spreader, including spikes, if a bit unspectacular in how it went carrying out those roles. Following Chestnut is its fellow Gen 6 starter, Delphox, whose fantastic special attack and speed alongside powerful, wonderfully complementary stabs made it one of RU's greatest offensive forces in Generation 6, held back only by its nasty weaknesses to Stealth Rock and Pursuit. Significant weak points for sure, but Delphox managed ferocity in spite of them, proving just how scary it was. It continued this playstyle in Gen 7 NU, but there it also had success using its unique set of resistances with a specially defensive Wish set, allowing it to fit on more defensive teams as well. Next, there's Emboar, who took a bulkier approach than its firefighting brethren in its debut generation of RU. It was one of the strongest choice Scarfers and brutal choice band alternative to Entei that hit harder, had strong secondary stab, as well as wild charges coverage, and lacked a Stealth Rock weakness. But it also pulled off an outstanding defensive set, which let it act as one of the tier's few reliable checks to the terrifying Durant, while still spreading damage effortlessly, not just thanks to its natural power, but with the reliable combination of Will-O-Wisp or Toxic and Protect. Emboar continued its vicious wall-breaking prowess in Gen 6 RU, made even nastier by a powerful Sucker Punch, which picked off many a faster, frailer would-be revenge killer, and then was so overwhelming in Gen 7 NU, it had to be banned. Concluding D rank is Emboar's fellow Gen 5 starter, Samurott. It's been a career NU Pokemon from Gens 5 to 7, and it's excellent in all of them. With good power on both sides of the attacking spectrum and a solid move pool, Samurott brought a diverse array of water type pain. It could run a vicious Swords Dance Sweeper set to clean up late game even against faster Pokemon with boosted Aqua Jets. It could run a great special attacking Wall Breaker set to break down the opponent, especially with Taunt to stifle recovery attempts, or it could attack from both sides with a mix set. Its access to Mega Horn was one of its greatest weapons, skewering not just grass, but also psychic types for maximum offensive destruction against a vast array of usual defensive countermeasures to attackers of Samurott's ilk. We move on to Torterra, which has leveraged its unique typing for both offensive and defensive purposes en route to lower tier success ever since Generation 4. Its stab combination is ferocious, with Earthquake downing fires hoping to switch into its Wood Hammer, a move that already brutalized most Pokemon with its massive power off of Torterra's impressive attack. Sure, flying types withstood both moves, but that's where Stone Edge came in, and when Torterra fixed its low speed with Rock Polish, it was one of the most devastating sweepers in DPP UU. It was one of the tier's most dependable tanks with a specially defensive set that was considered borderline immortal for how unkillable it felt for much of the offensive metagame. Even quadruple effective Ice Beams and Hidden Power Ices weren't coming close to threatening one-hit KOs on it. Both offensive and defensive Torterra variants continued to excel in Gen 5 RU, Gen 6 NU, and Gen 7 PU, where it was one of the most elite Pokemon in the tier full stop. After taking Gen 8 off, Torterra has returned to Generation 9 with renewed vigor, now brandishing Shell Smash, which makes it one of the most terrifying sweepers in RU. Moving on, we've got C rank. These are the most elite of those starter Pokemon that have mostly or exclusively stuck within the confines of lower tiers. Starting it off is Blastoise, one of the most defining lower tier Pokemon there is. For being a reliable bulky water in conjunction with its invaluable hazard clearing of Rapid Spin, it was a staple pillar of UU from generations 2 through 5. And if you count its Mega Form, which added a more offensive flourish to its usual support capabilities, it was actually 2 through 6. Its base form continued its excellence in Gen 6 as well, becoming a similarly relied upon staple of RU instead. In Gen 7, both tiers moved down a rank, Mega to RU and Base to NU, but both were reliable as ever. Additionally, despite not officially being part of the tier, Mega Blastoise maintained an excellent niche in UU. Blastoise lost its Mega in Gen 8, but gained Shell Smash, which led it to getting banned from a tier for the first time ever, as it cleaved through NU with effortless ease. Next, there's Feraligatr. When it was allowed in GSC NU, it warped the entire metagame around its presence and was banned. It improved upon gaining Swords Dance in Gen 3, allowing it to carve out a solid niche in UU. It improved even more in Gen 4, with the new physical special split allowing it to finally use Water Stab off of its far superior attack stat, making it a force in UU once again, especially as it had also gained Dragon Dance as a boosting option. And in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, it also gained valuable priority in Aqua Jet. It reprised the role of its SD and DD variants to superb effect in Gen 5 RU, then rose to new heights upon receiving its hidden ability, Sheer Force. In Gen 6, this, in conjunction with the Life Orb and no longer took recoil on Sheer Force boosted attacks, launched the power of its waterfalls and its ice punches and crunches as well, but mostly its waterfalls, to ridiculous heights, vaulting Gator back to UU in both Gen 6 and 7. Additionally, Gator had brief appearances in OU in all of Generation 4, 5, and 6. It was a unique alternative and sometimes partnered to Gyarados in Gen 4. Its Torrent and Mystic Water boosted Aqua Jets were game enders in Gen 5's permanent reign, and its Sheer Force allowed it to break the balance popular in Gen 6. Moving on, we've got Sceptile. With its amazing speed alongside solid power and coverage, Sceptile was a massive threat in Gen 4 UU. Whether it wanted to use Brute Force, a utility-based approach, Surprise Factor, or some mix thereof, whether it was Choice Specs Leaf Storm or the Sub-Seed combo, Sceptile would mess you up somehow. It got even scarier in Gen 5 RU, where in addition to the excellence of its usual tricks, it received the Unburden ability, which doubled speed upon the use of its item. It could activate this through a powerful Flying Gem boosted acrobatics that doubled as coverage against checks like Roselia and became a late game threat while maintaining its superb wall-breaking prowess. Its Mega Form was an absolute force in Gen 6 UU, stunningly strong and powerful, and packing an amazing new secondary Dragon Stab to boot, giving it fantastic, effortless coverage against fires and dragons that would resist its Leaf Storms. Mega Sceptile even gained the Lightning Rod ability, which in practice meant it could stave off some of the most annoying moves in the game, like Volt Switch and Thunder Wave. Mega Sceptile went on to reprise this excellence in Gen 7 RU. Meanwhile, Base Sceptile was so good in Gen 6 NU that it was banned for being overbearing, then returned to and excelled in the same tier once again in Gen 7 and Gen 8, while also getting banned from PU in the latter gen for crushing everything in sight. Additionally, Sceptile also had the slightest of niches in its debut generation of OU for being the fastest sub-seeder around, with a speed tier that notably outran huge threats like Starmie and a boosted Dragon Dance Tyranitar. Both threats it smacked for huge damage with its Stab Leaf Blade. Primarina's next on the slate, with enormous power to go alongside the fantastic coverage of its Stab combination. Specs Primarina was one of the most frightening Pokemon to face in Gen 7 UU, easily capable of blasting through pretty much anything that wasn't a Blissey, a task it carried out consistently in battle thanks to the same typing that gave it such fierce stabs, also blessing it with plenty of useful resistances defensively. As an extension of this, Primarina didn't just have to be a wall breaker. With its defensively invested Rest Talk set, it was also one of the tier's best bulky options, especially since even without offensive investment it hit plenty hard, with Scald's burn rate helping compensate for the lack of direct damage being dished out. Primarina's specs and Rest Talk sets returned to excellent results in Gen 8 UU, but it was also happy to brandish a new move it had received, Calm Mind, which made it even scarier to deal with. dishing out boosted damage while switching moves and being even harder to hurt on the special side. Incidentally, its sub-calm mindset saw a few flashes of OU usage as well. Next, we have Quaquaval, boasting Keldeo's famed stab combination. Well, technically Poliwrath, but made famous by Keldeo. Quaquaval had quite some promise. With a superb base 120 attack stat backed by Swords Dance and with a stab move Aqua Step that boosted its speed, this gave it a ton of potential as a sweeper, especially with its hidden ability Moxie, making it even more fearsome by boosting its attack upon KOing an opponent. The latter two paired beautifully. If Quaquaval KO'd an opponent with Aqua Step, it basically received a Dragon Dance for doing so. With its other stab none other than close combat, Quaquaval packed a punch. Oh, and it also had the excellent utility of Roost, U-turn, and Rapid Spin. Quaquaval started Gen 9 with some OU usage, as it was able to check both Chien Pao and King Gambit in addition to threatening offensively. As it wasn't much able to handle the likes of Toxapex, Amoonguss, and Dragonite, it eventually found its way to UU, where it was a tremendous sweeper, not just with Swords Dance but also with Bulk Up, making it even tougher to deal with by virtue of nullifying physical attacks' capability for revenge killing. Its rapid spinning was also highly valued, as it was a water type spinner in a generation where every ground type got spikes. When it received knockoff in the Teal Mask, it actually was banned from UU, as it pushed it over the edge as an offensive threat. Forget checking it with the Slow Twins or even the Boots reliant Salamence, which were quickly overwhelmed. However, as the metagame shifted, it was unbanned and continued to be a solid part of UU. And despite all three starters' current UU status, Quaquaval is the only one to have been banned from the tier. Finishing off the C rank is one of Primarina's fellow Gen 7 starters, Incineroar. Incineroar was one of the best, most defining Pokemon in its inaugural generation of NU. Its fantastic bulk, unique typing, and intimidate ability meant it switched in on an absolutely enormous portion of Pokemon in the tier, from which point it could harangue the opponent with the outstanding utility of U-turn and knockoff, the latter of which it had stab on. It was so good defensively, it didn't even matter that it didn't have reliable recovery. The pinch healing Figgy Berry would take care of that. Incineroar could potentially even tactically lower its own health into Figgy Berry range through Flare Blitz recoil. Of course, Incineroar wasn't just a defensive pivot. Excellent at that role though it was, it also utilized its fantastic attack stat and stab combination in conjunction with Swords Dance to become one of the scariest wall breakers in the tier, potentially made even stronger if it opted to hold Insinium Z and launch its Darkness Lariat into a monstrously mighty malicious moonsault. With Gen 8's removal of Z crystals, Incineroar could no longer hit quite that hard, but it was well worth it because it could now completely bypass its previous greatest hindrance and its Stealth Rock weakness with the new addition of Heavy Duty Boots, an item which let it excel in both taking hits and dishing them out. It was now so good it actually moved a tier up, landing in RU. And now we've got the B rank. The Pokemon here have been forces in OU at one point. First, we've got Infernape, one of the stars of its inaugural Generation 4, with fantastic speed, powerful offenses, and an amazing stab combination, as well as a deep offensive move pool to back it up, including coverage, boosting, priority, and utility moves alike. 8 was an immense threat to defense and offense alike, capable of performing so many offensive roles and doing so excellently, making it one of the most common defining Pokemon around. After Blaziken was banned from early Gen 5 OU, Infernape maintained another niche in OU throughout Black and White 1. Its speed and power weren't as impressive in the massively power-crept metagame, but it was still a force to be reckoned with. Sadly, it faded into obscurity with Black and White 2, being pretty much entirely outclassed by Keldeo. However, it made a roaring comeback in Generation 6 UU, becoming one of the tier's most ferocious threats in a manner reminiscent of the Gen 4 OU it had made its name in. Whether it was the instant power of Choice Band or the game-ending setup of Nasty Plot, Infernape tore everything up and maintained this throughout Gen 7 UU as well, becoming even better there thanks to Z moves. Infernape was crucially one of the few Pokemon capable of truly threatening the stall teams that dominated the tier. Following Infernape is its fellow Gen 4 starter, Empoleon. It wasn't as instantly fast or flashy as Ape in their shared OU metagame, but it was an excellent Pokemon. It was an excellent late game sweeper with its agility set, sets, especially those that powered themselves up via substituting down into range of Torrent and Pataya Berry. These variants had a legitimate claim to being the single most threatening late game Pokemon around. Empoleon wasn't just an offensive threat either. In addition to great bulk, the valuable set of resistances afforded by its unique typing allowed it to switch into a ton of threatening Pokemon, while being great team support with its deep utility move pool. This utility is largely what Empoleon focused on when it became a UU fixture in generations 5, 6, and 7, especially upon Defog being buffed, which allowed it to support its team even further by acting as reliable hazard removal, given all its switch-in opportunities. Empoleon has continued to excel in Generation 9, having finally received reliable recovery in Roost, as well as being able to capitalize on forced switches beautifully with Flip Turn, and packing the competitive ability to punish Defogs with doubled special attack to boot, which has propelled it to excellence in UU once again. Next, we've got the recently added Hisuian Samurott, which has been a high-tier Gen 9 OU staple since its introduction, always having a great deal of usage and success. Its strength lies in its sharpness-boosted Ceaseless Edge, which gives it a powerful Dark Stab equally as strong as a full-powered knockoff, while also laying spikes. This is an absolutely incredible tool for offensive teams, one of the tier's best stab types, which lays hazards as it attacks. Talk about punishing dark weak Pokemon. And Hisuian Samurott's strong and bulky enough to where it gets plenty of opportunity to fire off the move to solid effect against neutral targets too. Oh, and it's not just a Ceaseless Edge machine. Its other stab, Water, is also one of the best in the game, and very little is able to safely resist both of them. It's especially devastating because Sharpness also boosts Aqua Cutter and Razor Shell, so it's hitting really hard right off the bat. Oh, as if that's not all, it's got two amazing stab priority moves to pick from in Sucker Punch and Aqua Jet. It cleans the opponent up from every angle, and it even uses its dark typing defensively to help check other OU staples like Golden Go and King Gambit. Hisuian Samurott is one of the best, most popular Pokemon in Gen 9 OU. And speaking of Generation 9 additions, our next Pokemon is Meowscarada. Expectations were initially on the lower side, as yes, it had received Protean, but the ability had been nerfed to only change type according to the first move used per switch-in. But Meowscarada quickly demonstrating that it was not to be trifled with, brandishing a wicked speed stat, getting the jump on Iron Valiant and Cinderace, great attack alongside a superb stab combination consisting of knockoff and the always crit Flower Trick, and even amazing utility in spikes and U-turn. Meowscarada actually started off its time in OU using Overgrowth sets so it could wield both stabs effectively, and it blasted through much of the tier, becoming quite overwhelming long term. It also helped that far and away the most common physical wall, Great Tusk, stood no chance against Flower Trick, a move whose crit powers also let it rip through a defense boosted Garganacl, and slashing through even Terra Water variants super effectively. Meowscarada was a genuine terror in early Gen 9 OU. Then when the Teal Mask DLC came along, it was displaced by Ogerpon and Rillaboom, but that just meant Meowscarada began dominating UU instead. Its tremendous speed stat on display as it outpaced even Tornadus Therian, letting it spike, knockoff, and U-turn against seemingly everything, making it a top 5 Pokemon in the tier. Concluding B rank is the best of the Gen 9 starters, Skeledirge. With tremendous physical bulk alongside Slackoff's reliable recovery and unaware to ignore stat boosts, it quickly became a beacon of defensive stability in the chaotic power crept Gen 9 metagame. It didn't just take hits either. Will-O-Wisp not only distributed burns to threaten physical attackers even more, but also powered up its Hex, part of its excellent stab combination, the other half of which, Torch Song, also powered it up by boosting its special attack, a stat which was already quite sizable at base 110, mind you, which in effect made Skeledirge the first ever offensive unaware user. It dished out hits beautifully with its stab combination, sometimes complemented by Earth Power. Skeledirge took on monsters nearly nothing else could, from Iron Valiant to Volcarona to Dragonite to Hatterene. It was a superb defensive terrestrialization user as well, often becoming a fairy type to take on the likes of Dragapult and Hydreigon. Even after Skeledirge dropped to UU, it has continued to excel in OU for its ability to take on monsters like Zamazenta and pre-banned Sneasler. It's tremendous in UU as well, devouring major threats in Iron Hands, Scizor, Sinistcha, and Nasty Plot Tornadus Therian, while also threatening greatly in its own right, with Torch Song bolstering its already exceptional stab combination. Skeledirge is so good, it's even seen widespread use throughout Ubers, as it was one of the best counter to Koraidon in the entire game. That wasn't all. With Unaware, it also took on Zacian Crown and Extreme Killer Arceus. What What an unbelievable trio of things to counter, and to do so while not being a passive wall incapable of offense is just insane, as it especially enjoys the prominence of Sun boosting its fire stat. At one point, it was considered the second best or outright best non-Uber in Ubers, depending how you ranked Tinglu. Sure, the reintroduction of Kyogre hurt it, but it's still tremendous. The only thing keeping Skeledirge from a higher rank is the fact that it's only in one generation thus far. Next up, we move on to our penultimate rank, the A rank, for the starter Pokemon that have been repeatedly a force in standard OU play over the generations. Leading us off is none other than fan favorite Charizard, who's had several instances of success in the lower tiers as well. It was the unquestionable king of NU in generations 4 and 5, as well as its base form remaining outstanding in the tier as well as in Gen 6. Getting banned from PU in Gen 7 and having several excellent stints across RU and PU in Gen 8. However, when it comes to tearing up OU, Charizard goes as far back as Generation 2, where its belly drum set was potentially one of the scariest threats in the entire game. It was a unique, ferocious wall breaker Generation 3 OU as well. Then in Generation 6, it became an OU staple in two different guises with its mega forms, both of which were metagame defining top tier threats whose power and influence continued throughout Generation 7. Generation 8 took those megas away, but for the first time since Generation 3, base Charizard managed to find a legitimate, terrifying niche in OU again. In the Isle of Armor, its solar-powered Choice Spec set, paired with Torkoal's Drought, made it just about impossible to switch into, launching obscenely powerful weather balls that 2-hit KO'd even the likes of Blissey. Following Zard is its fellow Gen 1 starter, Venusaur. It's mostly thought of as one of the most iconic lower-tier Pokemon, which is funny considering how much it's been in OU. But there is no denying that it has been one of the best Pokemon to populate UU and below for a long time, from its tenure as the king of Gen 4 UU, to its elite status in RU in Generation 6 and 7, to its excellence in Gen 8 UU once more. However, though it's more of a sleeper pick, yes, fitting because it uses sleep powder, haha, it has also quietly been one of the most potentially disruptive Pokemon one could see in an OU match as far back as Gen 3, where its Leech Seed set was absurdly, vastly irritating to a great deal of standard teams. It was also quite good in Gen 4 OU, with its vastly improved physical bulk, allowing it to serve as a valuable alternative to Roserade on balanced teams. It wasn't quite so quiet in Generation 5, of course, as with Chlorophyll under Permanent Sun, it was one of the most terrifying sweepers around, so fundamentally overpowered that it eventually led to a ban on the Chloral Sun strategy. Nobody was complaining about the other Chloral sweepers nearly as much as Venusaur. However, in Gen 6 and 7, Venusaur went back to the low-key ways when it appeared in OU. Its mega form wasn't a skull-crushing wall breaker or lights-out late-game sweeper, instead opting for a more defensive approach, but the utility it brought its team was immense, since its defensive typing became even better with the fire and ice type weakness removing thick fat ability it gained. In addition to taking on several monstrous offensive threats with ease, making it an excellent choice on balance and stall alike, it still possessed the offensive toolkit necessary to be irritating to switch into, far from just being a passive wall. Despite losing its mega in Gen 8, Venusaur found OU viability once again. Once again, it utilized its Chlorophyll ability to become one of the scariest Pokemon Sun teams could wield. Moving on, we've got Swampert. It's also been a lower tier success as a fixture of UU ever since Generation 5, as one of the metagame's most dependable Pokemon. However, in Generation 3 OU, it was one of the tier's best, most important defensive pieces, holding the metagame together against an onslaught of dangerous Dragon Dancers and Choice Banders. It was arguably even more important as a physical wall than Skarmory, thanks to its crucial Rock Slide resistances and lack of Magneton weakness. Pert was similarly defining in Gen 4 OU, with its wonderful typing and bulk allowing it to take Thunderbolts and Fire Blasts of all sorts, while also being one of the most reliable stealth rockers around. Its Mega Form was more on the niche side in Gen 6, but with Gen 7 adding a much better Drizzle user in Pelipper and changing Mega Evolving mechanics so that the Pokemon received their Mega Speed boost on the turn they Mega Evolved, not the turn after, meaning it would instantly receive its Swift Swim boost. Mega Swampert became a massive threat in Gen 7 OU and a driving force behind Rain's immense popularity and success. Next up is Rillaboom. It occupied a unique, valuable role in Gen 8 OU, combining the excellent team support of grassy terrain with fierce physical attacking capabilities. Whether it was wielding Choice Band or Swords Dance, it was eternally threatening. The former set was able to soften up the opposing team and maintain momentum with further supporting capabilities brought about by knockoff and U-turn, while also constantly threatening one of the strongest immediate attacks in the game in Woodhammer. The Swords Dance set wasn't as instantly scary, but it was a potential game ender. Both sets made superb use of Rillaboom's unique grass priority move, Grassy Glide, which was both an offensive weapon and a great tool for keeping opposing threats in check. Rillaboom has also continued its excellence in Gen 9 OU. With its grassy terrain support so valued, its go-to set now runs the terrain extender for maximum duration, though eject button is also valuable for getting its teammates in as quickly as possible. This was particularly superb for the benefit of the recently banned Sneasler, who loved using Grassy Seed on its unburdened Swords Dance set. Rounding out A rank is Superior, whose debut generation of Black and White saw it have a decent niche in NU, but upon receiving its hidden ability Contrary in ORAS, it became an OU superstar for the rest of that generation and the one after it as well. It wasn't just that it was immensely threatening with a high-powered stab Leaf Storm that doubled as a nasty plot coming off of its outstanding speed stat. It was that simply the threat of the Leaf Storm spam enabled Superior to take full advantage of its devilish support move pool, from the eternally obnoxious substitute Leech Seed combo to the widespread annoyance of Glaire's paralysis infliction to wearing opponents down further with knockoff to bolstering Leaf Storm's coverage with hidden power fire, ground, or rock to bolstering Superior's longevity with synthesis or even secondary grass stab with Giga Drain. It could mix and match to delightful results. In Gen 7, it could even provide hazard removal support with Defog. And speaking of Defog, Superior's Contrary ability made it one of the nastiest Defog punishers in the game, since it would grab an evasion boost, and Superior was already bad enough to face without one. Contrary Superior is simply built to be an OU force. And finally, we'll finish with the strongest starter Pokemon. Those that have at some time ascended past the confines of standard play and into the land of the box legendaries, the Uber tier. Starting off our S tiers is Cinderace, whose Libero ability is a carbon copy of Protean and thus did pretty much the same thing as Greninja, but on the physical side. Boasting similarly excellent speed alongside a fantastic attack stat and terrific offensive move pool, as well as making full use of the hazard-ignoring heavy-duty boots, Cinderace terrorized OU with ease. It technically got banned twice, once in the Isle of Armor and then again in the Crown Tundra, but seeing as they were both Gen 8, and it arguably shouldn't have been released to begin with in the Crown Tundra, since nothing had really changed to change what was so fundamentally busted about it, that being it outsped and destroyed pretty much everything, and outlasted the few things that didn't instantly collapse under the brutal weight of its hits. In addition to the fact that it didn't even have a tiny Uber's niche, means that it comes in just below Greninja, though this is of course nothing to sneeze at. Cinderace won't be ripping the metagame to shreds in Generation 9, but that's because Libero and Protean were both nerfed to only change type to the first move used upon switching in. They didn't do that after multiple generations with Greninja, but they did do that after one generation with Cinderace, and that doesn't seem like a coincidence. Plus, Cinderace also had quite good usage in Generation 9 even with a nerfed Libero, often using Blaze as its ability and taking advantage of its great stats, Stab Pyro Ball, and access to the unique, amazing court change, allowing it to completely flip the hazard situation on the field. And it's really leaned into a support role with the use of Will-O-Wisp. The second S-rank starter is Greninja, which is made all the more impressive by the fact that it's only been in 4 generations. It's one of X and Y's biggest threats from day one thanks to its absolutely incredible ability Protean, which gave it stab on every single attack it used, which was absolutely incredible on a Pokemon with such incredible speed and great special attack. This elevated its already excellent offensive move pool to terrifying heights, allowing it to smash just about everything with force that was difficult to match. In addition, it also had spikes, which made it even scarier. It could take advantage of the many switches it forced and grab a lair, both supporting its team and making it easier for itself to wear its checks down over time. Greninja was already considered borderline overpowered at the end of XY, as the only Pokemon that could really check it at all reliably was the hazard immune, specially bulky Magic Guard Clefable, and then Oraz came around, adding even more of Greninja's overabundant wealth of coverage moves. One such move was Low Kick, which allowed Greninja to smack Chansey directly as opposed to just with spikes. But the straw that really broke Maxie's Mega Camerup's back was Gunk Shot, which let Greninja completely obliterate even Clefable, and as a result, it was banned almost instantly, earning it the distinction of the second starter Pokemon to be too much for OU. It wasn't too much of a threat in the far bulkier Uber tier, but it did have a small role as a fast lead, which set spikes and toxic spikes, using its fantastic speed to stifle taunt from Defog Arceus form. Then in Generation 7, Greninja returned with a vengeance, with its Protean boosted attacks bolstered further by the addition of Z-moves. As if it wasn't enough that they were made even stronger, it also was able to bypass the 2-turn effect of Dig and unleash a wicked Tectonic Rage that crushed unsuspecting Magearna and Toxapex. Additionally, because it just wasn't elite enough, it also gained another amazing ability, Battle Bond. This did mean it no longer packed stab on every move, but that was just fine since it was naturally so fast and strong with the great dual stab combination of water and dark, and the reward was absolutely staggering since if it picked up a KO, it would transform into Ash Greninja, a Pokemon so absurdly strong and fast it absolutely would have been banned if it was allowed to start battles in the form. Though Greninja didn't manage to pick up a second ban from OU, it certainly came close, as it was constantly subject to such scrutiny from a player base that dreaded facing it as much as they loved using it. The most defining of these starters is Blaziken, which gained renown and stirred up controversy in early Generation 5 when it became the first starter Pokemon to get banned. Its brokenness was obvious and unquestionable. The controversy stemmed from more casual players not wanting a starter Pokemon banned. Blaziken had already established itself as a unique competitive choice for its wall-breaking capabilities. It had a decent niche in its inaugural Generation 3 OU before going on to becoming one of the most feared threats in Generation 4 UU. Upon receiving speed boosts in Black and White, however, Blaziken became a whole new beast. No longer were its fierce offensive capabilities hindered by its subpar speed. Plus, those already dangerous offensive capabilities became even scarier with High Jump Kick being buffed to a shocking 130 base power and Permanent Sun sending its Fire Stab to searing new levels. It torched just about the entire tier with resounding ease, and pretty much nobody who wanted a competitive metagame was sorry to see it leave. Blaziken wasn't just an Uber once, it wasn't even an Uber twice, it was Uber 3 times, getting banned almost immediately in Gen 6 and not even being taken off the ban list in Gen 7. It was so innately powerful, it didn't even need its hilariously overpowered new Mega Form. Base Blaziken was already too brutal. It didn't mourn the loss of Perma Sun much either, as it was too busy enjoying Gen 6's knockoff buff and Gen 7's addition of Z-moves. A coalescence of various mechanics changes meant Blaziken was no longer quite broken in Gen 8, but it was outstanding in OU once again. But still, Gen 8 Blaziken could have been the worst Pokemon in PU, and it'd still be the greatest starter Pokemon of all time for its 3 Uber placements. As if that wasn't enough, it wasn't just one of those Pokemon that, which too good for OU, didn't fit into the Ubers tier. While it became more specific and niche in ORAS, and throughout Gen 7, its Mega Form in XY and its base form throughout Gen 5 were among the most terrifying Pokemon you could face in Ubers, especially the latter, which happily abused Groudon's Permanent Sun and High Jump kicked the daylights out of any Kyogre foolish enough to try and change the weather on it. It isn't even a contest. For its 3-time Ubers placements, as well as multiple instances of excellence in the Uber tier itself, Blaziken is the greatest starter Pokemon of all time in competitive singles. And that's it. Let us know if you agree with our rankings or not, as these things have quite a bit of subjectivity to them, of course. But lastly, we have a plea to Game Freak. Please buff Meganium somehow. It doesn't have to be Uber, just let it do something. Thanks for watching, everyone. And as always, if you liked the video and you want to see more, be sure to subscribe to False Swipe Gaming for more weekly Pokemon content. And thank you so much to our patrons for continued support of our videos. And thank you to everyone else watching as well. And follow my crew on these social media platforms. And that's all I got. See you next time, everyone.